2 months after my best friend died. His lawyer handed me a USB drive. Inside were videos he recorded about my wife, and the truth destroyed everything I thought I knew. The funeral was over, but the silence it left behind was louder than anything I had ever known. 2 months had passed since Marcus was buried, yet every morning I still reached for my phone, half expecting a message from him, some sarcastic joke, some pointless debate, or one of his late-night voice notes where he talked too much and laughed at his own words. Marcus had been my best friend for nearly 20 years. We grew up together, made stupid mistakes together, and stood beside each other during moments that changed our lives forever. Losing him didn't feel real. It felt like someone had pressed pause on the world and forgotten to hit play again. Life was supposed to return to normal after the funeral, or at least that's what everyone kept saying. My wife tried to help in her own way, urging me to move on, to stop replaying memories in my head. Friends stopped calling after the first few weeks, assuming I was doing better, because I no longer talked about Marcus every day. But grief doesn't work on a schedule. It hides in the quiet moments when you read driving alone, when you eating dinner in silence, when you reach for someone who's no longer there. Marcus and I shared more than friendship. We shared secrets, failures, and dreams we never told anyone else. He was the one who stood beside me at my wedding, smiling wider than anyone else in the room. I remember him clapping louder than the rest, teasing me afterward about how nervous I looked. Back then, I thought nothing could ever break what we had built over decades. He was family, closer than blood in some ways. That made his death feel like losing a part of myself I could never replace. In those 2 months, I tried to distract myself with work, with routine, with pretending everything was fine. But the house felt different. Conversations with my wife felt shorter, less natural. Sometimes I caught her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, her expression unreadable. I told myself it was just stress, just grief making me imagine distance where there was none. After all, Marcus's death had shaken all of us. There was no reason to question anything beyond that. At night, when sleep refused to come, I replayed my last conversation with Marcus. It was ordinary, almost boring. He joked about something trivial and said we'd talk soon. I never imagined that would be the last time I'd hear his voice. That thought haunted me more than anything else, the idea that life could change so completely, without warning, without closure. 2 months later, I was still living in that silence, still carrying questions I didn't know how to ask. I believed the worst was behind me. The funeral was done. The condolences had faded, and the world had moved on. I had no idea that the real storm hadn't even begun yet. The call came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where nothing feels important enough to remember later. I was at work, staring at my screen without really seeing it, when my phone vibrated on the desk. I almost ignored it. Lately, I'd learned that most calls brought nothing but small talk or reminders about things I didn't have the energy to care about. But when I glanced down and saw an unfamiliar number, something in my chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. The man on the other end introduced himself calmly. Professionally, he said he was Marcus's lawyer. For a moment, I couldn't even process the words. Lawyer, Marcus. The two didn't belong in the same sentence in my mind. Marcus hated paperwork, hated formalities, joked that if anything ever happened to him, people should just grab a beer and forget the rest. Hearing that he had a lawyer reaching out to me felt strange, almost unsettling. The lawyer explained that Marcus had left behind a few personal instructions, and my name had been specifically mentioned. He didn't say much more over the phone, only that it was important and that we should meet in person. His voice was neutral, but there was something deliberate about the way he spoke, like he was choosing every word carefully. I asked if something was wrong, if there was some unfinished business or legal issue I needed to help resolve. He paused before answering, just long enough to make my pulse quicken, then said, "It would be best to discuss this face to face." We set up a meeting for later that week. When the call ended, I sat there longer than I should have, my phone still in my hand. My thoughts raced in circles. Why me? Marcus had family, Coworkers, people who were far more organized than I was. The idea that he had specifically named me in any legal document made no sense. I tried to convince myself it was something simple, maybe he left me an old watch. Or some stupid inside joke he wanted passed on. That would have been just like him. When I told my wife about the call that evening, her reaction was subtle but noticeable. She froze for a second, just a fraction of a moment, before forcing a smile and saying it was probably nothing. She asked what the lawyer wanted, and I repeated what little I knew. She nodded, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. I brushed it off, blaming my own grief for reading too much into her expression. The day of the meeting arrived faster than I expected. Sitting in the lawyer's office felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life. The walls were bare, the atmosphere quiet and serious. He didn't waste time with small talk. After confirming my identity, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, plain USB drive. He placed it on the desk between us like it weighed more than it actually did. He told me Marcus had left explicit instructions that this drive was to be given to me, and only me. No copies, no explanations beforehand. I felt a chill run through me as I stared at it. In that moment, I realized this wasn't about a keepsake or a harmless message. Whatever Marcus had left behind, it was intentional. And somehow, deep down, I knew my life was about to change in ways I wasn't ready for. I didn't open the USB drive right away. I carried it home like it was something fragile, something that could shatter if I handled it the wrong way. The entire drive back, it sat in my jacket pocket, pressing against my chest as if reminding me it was there. My mind kept jumping between possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Marcus had never been dramatic, never the type to orchestrate mysteries. So why now? Why leave something behind that felt so heavy? At home, the house was quiet. My wife said she had errands to run and left shortly after I arrived. I told myself I was relieved to be alone, that I needed the space. In truth, the timing made my nerves stretch tighter. I sat at the kitchen table for several minutes, just staring at the USB drive in my hand. It looked ordinary, almost cheap, the kind you'd pick up without thinking. Somehow, that made it worse. Whatever was on, it didn't need to look dangerous to change everything. When I finally plugged it into my laptop, my hands were shaking. The screen flickered, and a single folder appeared. No fancy labels, just a date from a few weeks before Marcus died. Seeing that date hit me harder than I expected. It meant he had known something was coming, or at least suspected enough to prepare. My throat tightened as I double-clicked the folder. Inside were several video files and one text document. I hesitated, hovering the cursor over the first video. Part of me wanted to stop, to close the laptop and pretend I'd never been given this burden. But another part of me, the part that had loved Marcus like a brother, knew I owed him the truth. Whatever it was. I pressed play. The video opened with Marcus sitting in a dimly lit room, looking tired but focused. He didn't smile. That alone sent a wave of unease through me. Marcus always smiled, even when things were bad. He started speaking slowly, carefully, as if he was afraid of being overheard. He said my name, then paused, taking a deep breath. The sound of his voice, so familiar yet so final, made my chest ache. Halfway through the video, my stomach dropped. Marcus wasn't talking about his health or unfinished business. He was talking about trust, about things he had discovered that he couldn't ignore. Then he mentioned my wife, just her name at first, casually, like it was nothing. But the way he avoided eye contact with the camera told a different story. I felt a cold rush spread through me, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I slammed the laptop shut without realizing I'd moved. My hands were numb, my thoughts scattered. This couldn't be real. There had to be some explanation, some misunderstanding that would make sense of what I'd just heard. I paced the room, replaying his words in my head, trying to twist them into something harmless. But the tension in his voice, the seriousness in his eyes, told me this wasn't a joke or a mistake. When I finally opened the laptop again, my pulse racing, I knew there was no going back. Whatever Marcus had uncovered, he trusted me enough to carry it after he was gone. And as the first file ended, one terrifying truth became clear. The life I thought I understood was already cracking, and I hadn't even reached the worst part yet. After that first video, I couldn't bring myself to stop. Closing the laptop again felt pointless, like trying to ignore a fire already spreading through the house. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I opened the next file. A part of me still hoped the first video had been taken out of context, that Marcus would laugh it off in the next clip and explain everything away. That hope died within seconds. Each video revealed a little more, and with every minute that passed, the weight in my chest grew heavier. Marcus spoke calmly, but the strain in his voice was impossible to miss. He explained how it had started with small things, odd conversations, moments that didn't quite add up, patterns he couldn't ignore anymore. He admitted that he struggled with whether to tell me, afraid of destroying my marriage or being wrong about what he was seeing. Hearing that hesitation made the truth even harder to deny. Marcus wasn't reckless. He wouldn't have documented any of this unless he was certain. Then came the proofs. Screenshots, short video clips, audio recordings. Nothing flashy, nothing exaggerated. Just raw, undeniable evidence. I felt sick as I watched familiar places appear on the screen, locations I recognized, moments I remembered differently. In one clip, I heard my wife's voice, casual and unguarded, saying things she'd never say around me. The sound of it felt like a punch to the gut. I had to pause the video and steady my breathing, my hands gripping the edge of the table to keep from collapsing. Anger followed shock, sharp and overwhelming, not just at my wife, but at myself. I replayed old memories, suddenly seeing them through a new lens. Late nights she'd explained away, text messages she'd brushed off, times I trusted without question because trust felt easier than doubt. The realization that Marcus had been carrying this alone, watching it unfold while knowing what it might do to me, filled me with a deep, aching guilt. As the files continued, Marcus's tone changed. He sounded exhausted, almost relieved to finally be speaking freely. He explained that he saved everything on the USB drive because he didn't know how much time he had left. He didn't want the truth to die with him. More than once, he apologized for waiting, for not confronting me sooner, for leaving me with something so heavy after he was gone. That apology broke me more than the betrayal itself. By the time I reached the last video, my eyes burned and my head throbbed. I felt hollowed out, like something essential had been ripped away. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the collapse of a life I thought was solid. Every plan, every memory, every assumption felt tainted. When the screen finally went dark, I sat there in silence, listening to my own breathing. The truth was no longer something I could argue with or avoid. Marcus had shown me everything, not out of cruelty, but out of loyalty. And as much as it hurt, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing between me and my wife would ever be the same again. The final file on the USB drive wasn't a video. It was a simple text document titled with my name. Seeing it made my throat tighten, as if Marcus was sitting across from me, waiting for me to finish reading before he spoke. I opened it slowly, bracing myself for whatever was left to uncover. After everything I'd already seen, I wasn't sure I had the strength for one more blow. Marcus's words were direct, almost gentle, as if he knew exactly how broken I would feel by the time I reached this point. He wrote about our friendship, how long it had lasted, how rare it was to find someone you could trust without hesitation. He reminded me of moments I'd almost forgot. The nights we stayed up talking about the future, the promises we made to always have each other's backs, no matter what. Reading those lines brought a fresh wave of grief, but it also grounded me. This wasn't written out of anger or revenge. It was written out of care. He explained why he hadn't confronted my wife or exposed the truth while he was alive. He said it wasn't his place to explode my life without being absolutely certain. And even then, he wanted me to have control over what happened next. He admitted that part of him hoped he was wrong, that somehow things would resolve on their own. When they didn't, he He made a choice. If he couldn't protect me in life, he would do it in death. Marcus wrote that he trusted me to handle the truth with strength, even if it hurt more than anything I'd ever known. He didn't tell me what to do. Didn't push me toward confrontation or forgiveness. Instead, he reminded me that my worth wasn't defined by someone else's betrayal. That line stayed with me longer than the rest. It felt like a hand on my shoulder, steady and familiar, when everything else felt like it was falling apart. By the time I finished reading, the anger had softened into something quieter but heavier. I wasn't just mourning the end of my marriage as I knew it. I was mourning Marcus all over again. He had carried this burden alone, choosing loyalty over comfort, and trusting me enough to leave the truth in my hands. That realization filled me with a strange mix of pain and gratitude. When my wife came home that evening, I looked at her differently, not with rage, not with accusations, but with clarity. I understood that whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms, armed with the truth Marcus had given me. The conversation we eventually had wasn't explosive. It was calm, devastating, and final in its own way. In the days that followed, I realized Marcus's last gift wasn't the evidence or the revelation. It was the reminder that real friendship means protecting someone's dignity, even when it costs you everything. He trusted me to survive the truth, and because of that trust, I found the strength to rebuild my life honest. Painful, but finally real. If stories like this hit your heart and make you question trust, loyalty, and truth, subscribe to the channel. New real-life stories every week that stay with you long after the video ends.